Looking for a Valentine's gift she'll truly love? 1-800-Flowers.com knows what she wants. For 50 years, 1-800-Flowers.com has helped guys get it right, delivering millions of fresh Valentine's roses nationwide with high-quality bouquets guaranteed to last. Right now, when you buy 1 dozen premium roses, they'll double your bouquet to 2 dozen for free. Valentine's is coming fast, so don't wait until the last minute. Double your blooms today at 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast.
911, what's the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Tactical Living Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Walton, joined by Sergeant Walton. Glenn, how are you?
I'm good.
You know, it's really interesting. Under this administration, I never would have thought that we would see what we are seeing because of the actions that are taking place with ICE. All of the immigration laws have always been in place, and yet people are acting in the same way that they acted during everything with George Floyd in terms of the illegal behavior, and they're acting like these laws are not something that should be carried out.
Yeah, there's such rhetoric and mixed messaging that's pushed out there by media outlets, by just organizations that oppose everything that's going on, and ultimately, like, they're creating a us versus them mentality when you see on a regular basis, like, people are upset at ICE and how they're targeting law enforcement in general when most day-to-day officers have no involvement with anything that's going on.
Yeah, and something I shared with you this morning was that we're seeing a lot of the officers that work in Minnesota decide to quit their jobs as police officers and join ICE in turn. And I'm bringing that up because I wanted to talk about how there are a lot of officers who want more than the badge or more than just the badge. And in my opinion, going from a police officer to a federal agent working under ICE, that is an element of wanting something more. And yet I know that a lot of people want something more in terms of being out of law enforcement altogether.
Yeah, I think just like we saw in 2020, you're seeing people get fed up and tired of this political push where, you know, law enforcement's being demonized, and to have that motivation to seek something else for yourself by going from your day-to-day policing into a federal entity like ICE, it's risky because you never know. I mean, taking on a new job is always risky, but it's good to see people step out of their comfort zones and to strive for something more.
Yeah, or even out of law enforcement altogether. And I think the main reason for that is because most police officers have a lot of pride in their service. They have a lot of respect for the role that they do, and they've had to sacrifice a lot in order to be able to put on that badge and to wear that uniform. So it can be very difficult for somebody to get to the place to where they say, you know what, I'm going to make that transition.
Yeah, and that's definitely not not an easy decision to make, but ultimately, people get fed up. And I don't care what line of work you're in, you get fed up when you're being demonized for anything and everything that you're doing all the time.
Yeah, and, you know, I think that a lot of people, they might want something like more freedom or more balance or more meaning just beyond the job. And it's hard to be able to balance that or to even actualize it with yourself when those types of feelings come up. And I think it's important to explore that this doesn't mean that you're disloyal or that you're ungrateful. But I do believe that when you ignore that pull, then that's when things lead to resentment or burnout or even identity loss.
Yeah, I think over the last 5-6 years, we've seen this dynamic continue to where more and more officers in general are recognizing, yeah, this isn't what I signed up for, because their public service, their passion, what they're doing, it's not the same of what it was when they first signed up. So when you start reaching those stages of burnout and you start reaching this, why am I doing this? You have that question arise. It's being able to sit back and really analyze it and look at it and saying, okay, what changes am I going to make?
Yeah. So tell me what you think of this as a police officer, because we have a psychological concept here. We have identity expansion versus identity loyalty. And identity expansion is basically a healthy drive to be able to grow beyond just a single role. And when you have identity loyalty, it's it's the belief that pursuing anything outside of that job is actually a betrayal towards their profession.
I think it's ingrained in us from the academy as you're looking out for your partners, you're looking out for the community. And as soon as you step away from that, it's like a betrayal of your partners. And just looking at the dynamic of us calling out sick, right? And if you call out sick, then you're leaving your partners hanging for the day, where they're one less body to be able to go out and handle the calls for service. And it's so instilled in you in that level is it deters people from calling out. It deters people from not showing up to work, to where I think that's where we start identifying that, especially when it comes to moving out of that type of work dynamic, that it feels wrong and it feels unjust.
It's funny. It's a silent stigma that I don't think I ever hear anybody talk about, because in your department, I'm thinking about a really reputable sergeant who nobody would have thought that he would up and leave his job, his career, because he was so good at it, to just decide to open up a restaurant. And I think that a lot of the times people had their own thoughts and feelings, not only because, you are losing another partner, perhaps another good partner, but I also think that some people who have that pull that they're not taking any kind of action on, and even at the minimalist being able to explore things, there might also be some envy there. So given that example, what are some of the thoughts or feelings that you might have heard coming from other officers when they learned that sergeant was going to leave?
A lot of negativity, because a lot of people, they were happy for him to be able to go out and explore that option and to have that opportunity. But then there was negativity of well, hopefully he makes it. I bet you we'll see him back in a few years. And because they start making it okay to just almost have that negative spin towards it. But those who were close with that officer, that sergeant, were actually super happy for him, and he's super successful and doing really well for himself.
Yeah, and in my head, I'm thinking about okay, good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly.
And, some of that could come from people not knowing him fully and his capacity and what he's capable of. And then the other shift of that is sometimes people feel like it's going to be way too hard to do something like that. It's a lot more cush and you're settled and you should feel very secure in your current job. Why would you decide to make that change?
Yeah, and I think that's that fear of the unknown for most people is what starts creating that negative environment and that negative spin towards things. And like you said, I think it's a lot of envy, because others are like, I wish I could do something like that, but they don't ever want to take that jump or that leap to be able to change that dynamic for themselves.
Totally. And I think there are a lot of signs that somebody is wanting more, but they're actually fighting it. And in that example, I would imagine that he and his wife fought a lot when it comes to not downplaying your own dreams. And that's a big indicator that you might want something more, but you yourself are fighting it, or even feeling restless when things are totally fine. I know a lot of people, they feel guilty for wanting that kind of balance or that kind of freedom. Not to say that it's any easier, right? Opening a restaurant, I think, is one of the most difficult things that you can do. But eventually, you will gain a balance and a freedom that perhaps you wouldn't have been able to have working under somebody else.
Yeah, because you're now the boss of yourself, and you take on a lot more responsibility in a different way. And you are now not only responsible for yourself and your own livelihood, but your employees that work for you, and to build an organization from the ground up.
And I think there are ways to want more without burning bridges. And I'm using him as an example because he did a great job with this. And I think one of them is naming the desire without acting on things immediately. You know, he did a fantastic job with his transition and knowing the right time to be able to make that change. And there were a lot of external factors, political factors, economical factors that played into the timing of what he did and when he did it. And I think too, separating gratitude from self-denial is incredibly important. You could still be thankful for where you are and what you've accomplished so far, but saying that I want something else or something more doesn't mean that it's a bad thing.
And it's funny, like in that specific incident, that he retired, but he was still a reserve. But as time went on and the restaurant had that forward momentum happening more, he didn't have time to be the reserve anymore. And it was almost like he was still the reserve, not just for, it was like that unsaid cushion to where he could fall back and still have those relationships in place to be able to implant himself if it wasn't successful.
Now, I absolutely would never advocate for like going all in without kind of building up these stepping stones first. And I think it's really cool if you are in a stable job, like working in law enforcement, and you do have a desire to do something else, to be able to have side projects, whether it starts out as a hobby or, you know, starting your own business on the side, creating an LLC, like seeing where things can go while you have, seeing if you, because some people might say that they want to do something like making tents for camping, for example. But you would need to be able to see how hard you're willing to push on that off time that you have outside of a police department or whatever job that you do, to see what kind of success that you can gain, because things change. Like our opinions of things could change when we actually have to put in the work that's required to be able to make things sustainable.
Yeah, and it's a gamble, and everything's always a risk because you have to put in the work. You have to have that work ethic and drive to be able to change that.
I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below, and as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.